in sort of creative, weird ways. And we had one discussion about what is the difference between games and sports. And I had a whole little mini lecture about what I thought the difference between a game and sports was. And I'm not a student athlete, but many of them were. And they came up with something I didn't even think about that was actually way better than the distinction I thought was important. So they had high expectations for the course, and they pushed me to be even better in what I was doing and trying to come up with meaningful activities every time. And basically, I just felt these students deserve a really good course. I'm going to work my butt off every week to deliver it to them. So they were cool. I picked the right 10. And that's something I did the very first day. Because like all high achieving students, some of them have a little bit of imposter syndrome. And and they're all kind of looking at each other. And I knew if I was a freshman honor student, I'd assume everybody else was smarter than I was. And I was sort of got into the program by accident. And I reassured them all that they belonged here, that I picked them each and every one for a reason, sometimes for different reasons, but they deserve to be there and they should just get over it and not worry about whether somebody else might be a little smarter, a little brighter, whatever. And I think it kind of released the tension. You could almost see their shoulders kind of relax a little bit, that it wasn't a competition at this point. It was just a bunch of smart people hanging out and talking about cool things. I mentioned the extra activities. We went over to the music program, and Jeremy Kirk led us through a drum session. And what the students said that they learned most about that was that their professor had absolutely no sense of rhythm, which I was sort of disappointed about. And then we did some improvisational acting with Allison Moon in the theater program. She's the advisor for our improvisational comedy troupe, 9 Lives. And some of these students really got out of their comfort zone. You know, sometimes super bright students can be kind of shy, but they did it. We had a little debriefing after that experience, and each one of them reflected on it. And 2 of them said, it was one of the worst things I've ever done in my life, but I'm glad I did it. And that was kind of cool. So the service project. The service project I came up with was we were going to talk about, is play a right or a privilege? And I was hoping at that point that the students would sort of agree, play, particularly for children, is a right. If you deny children play, you deny them their childhood. And then we talked about who gets to play and who doesn't get to play. And that led into our service project, which is the students helped run a swim meet in Wichita for the Special Olympics. And that was fantastic. The woman who's in charge of Special Olympics Wichita is brand new, contacted her over the summer. She was delighted to help us be a part of it, for us to be volunteers. Again, many of the students in the honors program are student athletes, and there were lots of activities to be done at the swim meet. I've run swim meets before. It can be kind of crazy trying to get everybody lined up. And what my students got to do was give out the medals. And it was incredibly meaningful for them. On the way back, one of the students said, I've never been at an athletic event where everybody celebrated everybody, including their opponents. And this particular student said, I love trash talk. I love trash talking the other team, but this was better. And I don't know why all athletics can't be this celebratory. And the fact that that was the main message that they took, I thought was wonderful. And I hope that they take that into their own sports and think about their sport as not solely a competition, but a celebration of athletics. So it was a very moving experience. Afterwards, they said, can this be our service project every year? Can this just be something the honors program always gets involved in? So I'm seeking out the possibility of some sort of lasting relationship with the Special Olympics. It meant a lot to them. I told you that the students did do their own presentations at the end of the semester. I'm going to kind of go through the topics here. Professionalization of youth sports, the negative effects of that. music as escapist play, play deprivation in the hearing impaired. One of my students has a hearing difficulty, and she was very passionate about that. Gender bias in children's play and children's toys. And this last one was very interesting. I put it on the topic list. I did not think any student would pick it. I wanted to put it on there to show how diverse the idea of play as an academic subject could be. And the topic was drag. Drag as a form of play. And 2 students said, yeah, that's the one I want to do. All right, that's fine. And one of them had actually been to a drag show several times in Wichita. There's a beautiful theater there called Roxy's. They do about 10 productions a year, full theatrical musical productions. But they also do a drag brunch once a month where some of the players dress up. And Kira, the student who was involved in this, had gone to that. She said, yeah, it'd be fun to take the class there. And I went, I can make that happen. So as an optional activity, the students got to go to a drag brunch, and we got to talk to the performers, and they talked about the conception of play. And it was a very eye-opening experience for the students. Again, it was optional. Not everybody felt comfortable going, but that was really neat. One last thing I want to share with you. At the midterm, I had the students evaluate the course, and I had one student say, I don't know what the point of this class is. I'm not sure why any of this is really valuable. And I thought, okay, I'm not really doing my job. I'm not really explaining to them or helping them articulate why this class is worth having. So I came to class after the midterm and I said, well, I got this comment. It's a really good question. It's not a bad question, but we have half of the semester to answer it. This will be one of your final exam questions. Why is the study of play worthwhile? Why is the study of play important? So here's the response from the student who had that criticism. Please pardon. Okay. For a really long time, I didn't understand why we were studying play. But as a psych major, when we got to the human side of things, it made me realize how beneficial this is to me in my career. Play is so important for humans to live a long and happy life, and it isn't spoken about much in the psychology classes that I've taken. It's, let's see, we'll skip over here. This has opened my mind up to the fact that we need to be kids. Kids help us let loose. They don't have a single care in the world. And later on, she begins to talk about, I chose this because of my experience with depression. For a couple of years, I didn't play because I couldn't. My mind wouldn't let me enter the magic circle. The magic circle is a concept developed by a cultural historian named Johann Huizinga, who says it's key to understanding what play is. I was consumed by my own intense thoughts so much to the point that play wasn't important. Making it to the end of the day was not playing, only made my depression worse when we talked about the psychological side of play. It really opened my mind about all the mental barriers that affect play, like depression, anxiety, and even eating disorders. So to take this student who initially thought that the class was actually sort of a waste of time, that now she loves it, and it's also helped her deal with depression. Again, I'm just lucky. I'm lucky to have been able to teach this class and be part of these students' lives for a bit. So questions about the play class?
Is this going to be your ongoing freshman seminar, you think?
Yes, until I get bored with it. Because I have ideas for some I have some ideas for other courses that I will be developing as we move forward. But this one seemed to work so well that as long as I can stay engaged and excited about it, yeah. Unlike many courses that I've taught, where once you get to that last week and once you get to finals, you just want to walk away from it. You just want to let it go for a bit. I've got so many notes that I've written about things I want to change, things I want to add, things I want to get rid of. I'm looking forward to the summer to revamping this course. And I don't know if I've ever looked that forward to reworking a course. So that says something good, I think.
And what's your plan for the spring then, for the cohort?
So the spring course. Let me see, where's my notes here? So I've always felt that one of the more transformative aspects of education comes from travel. So early on, as we were thinking about what the honors program should look like, we wanted to make sure the honors program had regular travel courses. Again, this is inspired by my colleague Cheryl Rood and the work she's done with Southwestern's leadership program that's always featured travel. Foolishly, I decided to design my first travel course for the first year of the honors program with absolutely no experience in creating travel-based college curriculum. Turns out it's a lot of work. Luckily, I decided to play it safe and stick with a destination that I know well, my hometown of Chicago. So this coming spring, I'll be spending the semester with about a dozen students learning about the history and cultural diversity of Chicago. We'll be reading a series of novels set in different neighborhoods and key time periods from Chicago's past. Carl and I were talking about this earlier, so I've got the books out. So we'll start with The Devil in the White City. This will be in 1893 during the Chicago World's Fair. Then The Jungle, which I believe is around the 1920s, set around the meatpacking industry. Richard Wright's Native Son, which is about the African-American community in the 30s and 40s. And then The House on Mango Street, which is about a Hispanic community in the 70s, I believe. We're also going to be, in a sense, it's almost going to be 3 courses. Mondays will be our book discussion group where we'll read these novels and have a nice book discussion. Wednesdays will be the Chicago history class, which we'll be using, I believe, this book, The City of Big Shoulders, in which every week we'll be visiting a key moment, a key movement, a key personality relevant to Chicago's history. And then Fridays will be Anything Can Happen Day. That may be where we'll have our exams, maybe a documentary. That's probably also where I'm going to cook, where I'll introduce the students to Chicago deep dish pizza. I make a very good deep dish pizza. President Liz makes Italian beef in a crock pot, so she's going to be a guest one day. And then I'll introduce them to the wonders and mysteries that are the Chicago hot dog. You can't know Chicago without knowing its food. At the end of spring, we'll travel to Chicago for a 9-day visit hosted by the Chicago Center in Hyde Park near the University of Chicago. Now, like all cities, Chicago has a beautiful, vibrant downtown that is typically the #1 destination for tourists, the Loop. I spent a lot of time there. It's the heart of the city, but we're going to focus on the soul of the city. And just like all cities, the soul is the neighborhoods. And so the theme of our visit is going to be feeding souls, feeding bellies, and feeding hearts. So we'll be exploring different ethnic neighborhoods through their houses of worship, their food, and their arts. And then the students are also going to be participating in a service project coordinated through our hosts, the Chicago Center. So we're going to visit on our itinerary. We're going to go far to the north to go to the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette. We're going to go to Skokie to visit the Holocaust Museum. We're going to go to Grant Park to visit Unity Temple, the Unitarian church that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. We're going to go to Rockefeller Chapel on the University of Chicago campus. We're going to visit Hispanic communities in Pilsen and La Barrica. We're going to go to Little Ukraine. We're going to go to Chinatown. We're going to go to the African American History Museum in Hyde Park. We're going to visit the only remaining building from the World's Fair in 1893, which is my favorite museum in the world, the Museum of Science and Industry. And then there'll also be time to go to the Loop so the students can get a picture in front of the bean and, you know, do that kind of touristy stuff too. And part of what we'll be doing during the spring is the students will get a chance to kind of plan their part of the trip. What do they want to go to the Art Institute? Do they want to go to the Field Museum? Do they just want to go shopping? I want to give them that opportunity too. So again, they feel like they're part of the ownership of that thing. We'll do the boat architectural tour, which I've never done, where you take a boat through the Chicago River and you get some of the history and the architecture. Everybody that I've talked to said, "Oh, you have to do that." I grew up in Chicago. I've never done that. There's 2 plays that we're going to see. They haven't been picked yet. I think I'll also have Dawn Plez. Dawn and I, if you have not met Dawn, Mama Dawn, some people call her, Dawn is about my age. We grew up in Chicago at almost exactly the same time, about 20, 30 minutes away from each other. Never met, never dated, if you're thinking that would happen. But I want her to come down, and we'll probably on one Friday have a debate between Dawn and myself about which team is better, the Chicago Cubs or the Chicago White Sox. And then the students can decide which baseball team we might visit in terms of going to a game. One of the wonderful perks of doing this is I spent the summer, some of the summer back in Chicago with my mother, Mary Sue Brown. She still lives in the area, to help put together the logistical details of the trip. So she visited a lot of these neighborhoods with me, tried some food she had never tried before, got to know Chicago in a way that she had not seen before. Because as a kid growing up, we always went downtown, visited the museums, and then drove back to the suburbs. And she loved it. She offered her advice, her insight. She fell in love with the project, and she's made a sizable donation to help offset the cost of the program, making it much more affordable for the students. And I really thank her for that. Unfortunately, there are a couple of honor scholars that have decided not to enroll in the course due to the associated cost. I'd love to make travel a required part of being in the honors program, but it's especially given that the next trip I want to do is going to be international. I don't think it's fair to the students to do that. But we do have 7 of the honor students will be involved in the course, although not all of them will be able to go on the trip. We also have some non-honors students. What we're going to do with all the honors courses, except for the freshman honors seminar, it's open to other students on campus. They just have to get instructor permission. So I want to make sure that the students that are going to Chicago are not ones that are going to make things a problem, let's say. So we have 4 additional students outside of honors who are going to be on there. And I just convinced one more, and she's really cool. So I'm glad she's decided to go too. So yeah, so what questions or advice do you have on this, the Chicago trip?
My thought earlier, as you were describing it, did run to the opportunity to go and the finances surrounding that. And so it's obviously not fully financed by the college, but you know, I suppose there are parts of it that are kind of covered by the college. Is that correct? Or how do you handle that financial side of it in terms of, you know, what do they pay? What's the situation?
Sure. Initially, there was not going to be any funding by the college, and it was my job to try to keep the cost down as much as possible. So the Chicago Center, an organization we've worked with for many years, used to be called the Urban Center, is putting this together. They're also going to have some classes. So the first day we're in Chicago, they're going to have a class on just how to navigate Chicago, how to use the bus system and the L and all of that, how to survive in Chicago, kind of a thing. They're putting us up in a brownstone. We're going to get an entire floor. It has its own kitchen and meeting room. It's really quite nice. And they're providing a number of the meals for us. So I've worked very closely with them to try to get the cost down. And my goal was to have the cost between $1,000 and $1,500. With my mom's contribution, we've brought it down to just under $1,000. And we had a little bit of a problem with enrollment, and that the original estimate was based on the idea that I thought everyone enrolled in the course was actually going to go on the trip. That turned out not to be the case. And I was worried that the cost was going to go up quite a bit, but the fellow I'm working with at the Chicago Center was able to keep the cost per student the same. And with my mom's contribution, the cost right now is going to be under $1,000 per student. I have a budget for the honors program. It's mainly for activities during the semester. But if we were going to run into any situations where the cost was going to be prohibitive for most of the students, I had been given permission to use some of that money to offset the costs, to maybe take $100 off of every student's bill. But I think from what I've heard from Cheryl Root, who's done these programs before, for a domestic trip, if the student cost is around $1,000, that's reasonable. And for an international trip, try to keep it around $2,000. The students do have to pay for their own travel. This is going to occur in late May. So some of the students will be traveling from different destinations. So we've got one student who might be traveling from as far away as Las Vegas. Most of them will be traveling out of Wichita and out of Tulsa. So their travel arrangements are their own.
But generally, nobody's driving. Kids won't be having transit. And I don't know, if somebody lived in St. Louis, they might think I'll just drive up. But
yeah,
no,
I think everybody's going to drive. Sorry, going to fly.
Sorry, I kind of used my mom's computer. I was going to ask, is it too late to sign up for the Chicago thing?
No, Gabby, I'd love for you to come on the Chicago class. So let me introduce you guys to Gabby. I mentioned that we had 2 current students who wanted to join the honors program as juniors and seniors, mainly to do a senior honors thesis and be a part of it. And Gabby's one of them.
So for the Chicago thing, when I go through my self-service, can I go ahead and add that class? Or
yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is an unexpected benefit.
Since this is the first semester, and you
Sure.
were talking about student athletes who are in the honors program, do you foresee any kind of conflict between the amount of time that you need to spend extra as an honors student and some of these extracurricular activities? I know that some of the athletic can be very time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I would wonder how that might work out. In the fall, I don't know what you've had football, and I don't know what other, whether or not.
Yeah, we had several student athletes that were fall athletes. We had 1 football player, volleyball, let's see, tennis this spring, golf. But in answer to your question, no. Again, I don't look at the honors program as, these are courses that are going to be twice as difficult or a ton more work. It's more, these are students that have demonstrated strong academic ability. So it should be a treat for them to all be in the same room and not have to worry about some of the typical things that we do with freshmen to keep them on track. So for example, we don't have a quiz every week to make sure you're doing your reading. My assumption is you're honor students, you do the reading. Let's not waste time doing a multiple choice quiz. Let's just get into the discussion. My expectations for them in terms of the quality of their writing, the depth of their commentary is higher. But in terms of the amount of time, I think the biggest thing for the play class and the Chicago class that might be more time intensive than the regular freshman work is probably the amount of reading. So I think they're balancing it just fine so far. You'd have to ask them if they thought that that's the case. So Carl had a question, and Carl and I were talking just before this. When he was at Southwestern teaching, he took students on a Jan term trip to Chicago, which I just learned about this morning. So I may be picking his brain in terms of some of the stuff that he did with the students. But Carl, you had a question?
Well, I'd like to make a statement.
Yeah.
Is the camera?
The camera is on you, yes.
Am I at the right place?
You are at the right place, yeah.
I can't tell whether I'm in the camera. Or
There you are.
not. Okay. I'm Carl Martin. I think many of you may be aware that I started my journey with Southwestern and started to be a builder 65 years ago when I was a freshman. And so as a freshman, what happened, I ended up, I came to Southwestern because I knew this was the character of the college. Not only was I, as a freshman, I had requirements to get myself introduced to music, introduced to the sciences, et cetera, et cetera. And I had an incredible experience as a freshman because Ross Williams taught the string program here. And in addition to being a faculty member full-time, he played in the Wichita Symphony. So he was faculty member, but he also had a presence and capacity to be a part of the Wichita Symphony. There were not many church-related college faculty that had that kind of credential and got that kind of access. So one of the first influences in my life as a student was encountering Ross Williams, who required that I come to class and stay awake and listen to music. And I have been so grateful to him. Both of his sons ended up being musicians and became professional musicians themselves. So I want to say to you that this initiative you're taking, and I want to congratulate you because there's a strong history of capacity of people to be generalists when they graduate and do lots of different things. And I happen to be one of them. my first year as a freshman, I studied organ, and after I had studied organ for about a semester, the organ faculty person says, "Well, Carl, you know, I think you probably would be better prepared for speech and theater." And so I remember that very well because I tried to play the organ, but it didn't work. I ended up marrying a person who played one very well, and that blessed my life immensely. And so I want to say that I commend you for this momentum to build generalists who find little spots of excellence in their life, like Ross Williams did, because he became a model for me. Later in my life, I ended up being a board member of the Wichita Symphony, and I had an opportunity there to understand why Ross had that ability. You understand what I'm saying? When I got into the position of seeing what it took to keep a symphony going, I really enhanced my. You understand my respect for Ross? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was as a freshman. I'm a completely different age now, but as a freshman, I saw in Ross those traits being lived out. They weren't somebody else doing it. It was Southwestern faculty people that were modeling being a generalist, and I appreciated that so very much. And so I guess what I would like to say to each of you is I commend you for this quest. I admire you for going on this venture because it's also related to another history of Southwestern. For years, Southwestern College had a January term. That January term let students like me go to Washington, D.C., and it wasn't just I the one that did it. There were 5 of us that went to Washington, D.C. and were students at American University. That experience, you see, I remember how different it was for me to get on a train on public transportation and ride down to the classroom and come back to an apartment room because I grew up on the prairie and I saw the beauty of the world. And when I was in Washington, D.C., I was in a completely different environment. And I'm so grateful that Southwestern College had that program.
Mhm.
So
I think you're
want-
right, Carl. I
What?
think you're right. It's Kathy Baker. Hi. I think you're right that Jan term was, for those of us of a certain age, was a critical part of going to Southwestern. That was the best part. You know, I mean, I learned a lot in spring and fall, but Jan term gave you a chance to try something new on and be a different person. And if you were a theater person, you could go on a biology field trip. And if you were a biology person, you could go be in a play. But my question to Pat is, you said some of the students opted out of the travel semester because of finances. How many are we talking? And, you know, how many students, if money was not a problem, would you have them all, would they all be back? Or do they have different reasons for not wanting to travel?
For some of them, it's just money. For some of them, it's scheduling. They've got other things going on, a family trip. And for some, it's both. I'm not sure of the three. It's 3 or 4 that are not who are not or opting out of the trip. How many are just it's a money thing?
I think another thing that is really relevant to this process is that the Jan term worked for a while and lots of people got to participate in it, as I did, and I was able in my presidential role to facilitate that kind of thing for some other people. But the Jan term is a problem because if a campus is focused enough on athletics that the athletes can't be gone, they can't leave practice or a game for a period of time to go to Jan term. So the Jan term failed because, in my view, that other people have a different interpretation. But the reason that the Jan term became such a problem is that the athletes could not get free to go and do the travel. In other words, I was able to take a group of students to Chicago, but none of them were athletes.
Right.
At the time, I didn't recognize that. You understand that? I wasn't aware of what was happening. But what happened is the pressure became so great on that being able to have everything together all the time that the Jan term was eliminated. And I was part of that process, and it was very painful because lots and lots of people were regretted that Southwestern made that choice.
Yeah, and I'm running into an athletic problem as well. There were some students that I spoke to about being in the Chicago class, and because of and Elliot, you know about this, because nationals for track cross country and nationals for tennis occur in mid to late May. These students said, well, we might be going to nationals, so I can't be in the class. So they don't even know if they've made it, if they've qualified. On the off chance that they might, I'm not going to worry about the trip.
I appreciate what you have just verbalized, because this was such a difficult thing for the institution, especially for faculty, because many of the faculty knew the incredible experience of what the power of a personal experience, even a short one. Had I guess what I want to say is that I think I am really affirming. I want to do all I can to affirm what you are saying, and the reason. And I'm going to manifest that by saying that my relationship with the Wichita Symphony is such that if any of you want to go to the symphony this Saturday and hear the Gershwin music, all you have to do is go to the ticket box and say, Carl Martin will pay for my ticket. And that's true. I have that relationship with the symphony. And if you tell them that you want to hear Gershwin and that Carl Martin has paid for it, you go enjoy the symphony.
So, well, thanks, Carl.
I mean that. How many ever of you decide to go? I'll do it.
Appreciate the offer, Carl, but it's a busy weekend. We come into the holidays.
Going to interject, Carl, I assume you're, in my case, paying my airfare to come back as well.
There we go.
Well,
Okay.
if he can do that, then he can cover the costs of the students who are short on money for the Chicago.
Pat, I don't know, how you intend in terms of fundraising for that program. I know there's huge emphasis on the Builder Fund, which I usually give to, but and I don't, I don't know if you want to nickel and dime a lot of people into different programs, but say for this year's Chicago trip, what would be the amount of money that might be needed to be contributed that would allow the other two or whatever it is that want to go that can't? I mean, I'm not trying to get you into a fundraising position here, but nevertheless, that might be helpful. I mean, there are people here, that they may not give it, but if it was word of mouth, it could be helpful.
I would say a couple $1,000.
A couple $1,000, what?
A couple of $1,000
for each person or for the whole thing?
For the whole thing.
Okay.
In that, if a student's looking at $1,000 bill as being prohibitive, if we could bring that down by half, I think that for most of them, that I haven't spoken with them, but I think that kind of change could make a big difference. I don't know if there's some students who are feeling I can't pay any of this, and the only way to go is if it costs nothing. I worry a little bit about that because sometimes there's a level of personal investment that a student has in an experience that if they don't pay for it, they may not value it as much. I don't know if I'm as clear as I want to be on that, but I do think it's important that it's at least at some level, this is an experience that the students feel that they're sacrificing a bit for, and they should.
Yeah, it's kind of a question of, it'd be kind of like a scholarship. And, I think it would be really nice if they could. That also means, though, that the other 8 that are going or whatever didn't have a chance for this scholarship either.
Right. I feel a little weird about that.
Their financial situation supposedly is a little bit better than the others.
And I may send a note out to all of them to say, well, we're thinking about, as we move forward to other travel courses, what is the kind of cost that you would have been willing to pay? Not saying, hey, we've got some folks who are willing to throw more money at the project. Will this make you go? But what is the price range where students would feel this is valuable enough to spend some money on? Because there are definitely some students who are going simply because logistically it doesn't work for what their plans are for May. But I'm going to look into that just so I have better information to share with anybody who might be interested in making a contribution.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you come up with, Pat. You don't have to fly me in. I can meet you at College Hill.
Okay.
For a coffee day.
That's good. That's good.
Pat, I'm always curious about a lot of things, but in terms of the other private liberal arts colleges in Kansas in the area, how many of them have programs that are similar to this or competitive towards this, or is it something that most colleges, small colleges, need to have, or what's the competition level there in terms of honors colleges among liberal arts?
Not as great as you would suppose. You find it at a lot of the big state schools. KU's got a really good one. I would think, I didn't check all of them. I'm probably going to spend some time this summer. Part of what I wanted to do in creating it was not worry so much about what everybody else was doing. Grow my own from scratch and then look around. But I think when I was doing some initial surveys, maybe about half of the KCAC had honors programs.
I just I think it's wonderful to have the program, and thank you for putting it together.
Sure.
But it certainly is a drawing point for a college,
Mhm.
especially if there are maybe half the KCAC that don't even have it at this
Yeah.
point.
No, that would be another good data point to have for these kinds of conversations. And it's interesting. We were working on it. I was on the curriculum committee 2 years ago, and myself and Jacob Nagley put a lot of work into, well, we've got a new president coming in. Under the previous president, there had been some discussion about an honors program, but it never really went anywhere in a concrete way. And there was a thought on the curriculum committee, well, we should have something in place. And my argument was, it's a new president. Who knows what their view of an honors program should be? So let's just write up a document that talks about the history of the honors program at Southwestern. And what I found that honors programs typically fell into one of three categories. So we presented that to Liz when she got here, and she was a huge fan of honors programs and put a lot of effort into, let's make this thing happen. And so I was sort of in the right place at the right time to be the person selected to be chair. And she, as part of the fundraising campaign that's going to be moving forward, will be, I believe, a sizable endowment that will be just for the honors program. And I think the hope for that is that that will also help to underwrite travel plans, especially when we go international. And I think I will, for the first international trip, probably still stay within my comfort zone in terms of an area of the globe that I've visited and know my way around. Luckily, there's a lot of candidates for that. My top one would be Trinidad in the Caribbean, simply because I've spent a lot of time there and I know the entirety of the island quite well because I did all my PhD research there. And I don't think many students would turn down the ability to go to a Caribbean island. I don't know.
In the right season.
Yeah, in the right season. Correct. So that is 2 years away. So let me get through Chicago and make sure that worked and learn some lessons from it, and then we'll think about going international.
You mentioned it, but what are the dates of the Chicago trip?
May 14th to the 23rd. So just
after school has finished for the semester.
And it was going to be a little earlier, but then I realized I'd miss my son's graduation from grad school. So I gave it a nudge so I could see him finish up at KU. Anybody else want to sign up for the course?
Yeah.
Okay, Nancy's on board. Great.
I was going to say, are you going to let alums go on the trip?
You would have room for alumni who might be interested.
There we go.
Or not.
That would be a conversation I'd have to have with Liz.
And that could kind of mess up the kind of camaraderie that you're trying to achieve, to have this kind of unknown alum hanging around there.
Yeah, you don't want to chaperone.
Yeah. The one who says, hey, we're going downtown tonight. Who wants a lift? We're going to visit a couple of my old watering holes. I want them all tucked into bed at a reasonable hour instead of carousing with you guys.
Right. We'll let you tuck them in, and Hal and I and Nancy and whoever else can go. Correct.
There you go.
We'll be in bed before they will.
We might have to participate, but stay in an Airbnb near where the rest of them are.
Exactly.
One event we're hoping to put together is there are a lot of Chicago area alums of the college. And since we do have this, the full floor of this brownstone is to do a meet and greet where Chicago alums could come and meet the honor students.
Where is the brownstone located? What part of town?
Hyde Park. On
that south side.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be a good experience too, rather than being up on the Gold Coast in some sort of place up there. You know, the South Side will be a great experience.
Mhm. And Hyde Park is a beautiful place to walk around. My aunt lived there for a decade or two.
So,
And
Dr.
there
Ross,
is,
I have a question.
Mhm. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Just fine, Nancy.
Okay. Well, of course, from my perspective, I was a freshman at Southwestern 60 years ago. So it's been a while. I'm just glad I got on to figured out Microsoft Teams here. So the thing is, what if you have a brilliant student? This is off the topic of the Chicago trip and everything. What if you have a brilliant student that shows up and they say they want to study AI and how the algorithms would meld with quantum computing? They want to study that. And they would say, is there an honors path for me?
Mm-hmm.
So is there an honors path for somebody that shows up that is just, a real brain, that, and there are some out there, just like Josh Dobbs, the rocket scientist, who's the walk-on quarterback for the Vikings. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are people like that out there. So what would you do if you encountered a student like that? Would there be a path for them?
If I'm understanding your question right, um, the answer would be yes, as long as we have the faculty expertise to serve that student in their
Exactly.
intended academic and professional path. So we do have a computer science program.
Is it robust? Do you have a robust computer science IT program there?
It's one we've struggled with because it's difficult to hire good faculty because they can command such high salaries elsewhere.
Yes, I know.
It's similar to business. What was I trained to do? My research was on mating behavior of guppies. Turns out that watching fish have sex doesn't get you a high salary outside of academics. So I had no other options besides teaching at a college. But if you're trained in engineering, computer science, business, if you're going to teach at a small liberal arts school, it's because you have some missionary zeal for teaching, and you really want to do that, even though the salary will be lower than if you went for the private sector. So that's been our struggle there. That being said, I do think we've got a good program.
I think
So
so
they
too.
could be an honor student in computer science
Yeah.
and potentially ask computer science faculty to do an honors contract with them so they could take a programming class or a digital arts class and do it for honors with some special readings or project or service project connected with it that satisfies the aims of the honors program.
Yeah, that's what the thing is, if a professor was willing to take on a student such as, with that type of intellect or that type of, interest, then it's just, that would be a feather in the cap for the honors program anyway.
Sure. But if we had a student, for example, that really wanted to pursue aerospace engineering and they were super bright, this is not the place for it. We have no classes that serve. Yeah. So it would need to be a student that already aligns with at least something we're doing with a major or an academic area. We still have something here called the BLS, Bachelor of Liberal Studies, in which a student can craft a major by, in essence, merging 3 minors together. We haven't had a student do that in a while.
Yeah, I was wondering,
do.
It's I was just thinking about the hot topics today, and you might have a student like that is just not, that was just a for instance I brought up, but somebody that is really into, a hot topic that they got interested in high school and pursued. and they're interested in going to Southwestern.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
that's so it's just, I was just curious that would there be a path for somebody
Yeah,
like
I
that?
think so. Yeah.
That would be excellent. And you're
Yeah, as
having
long as
too
we
much,
can academically serve their main interest adequately, I'd say sure.
and you're having too much fun, I can tell.
So there was a moment this semester as I was putting this together, and I turned 60 this year, and
I was a freshman in college then.
uh, I've created a lot of courses, and I haven't in a while. By the time you get to this point in your teaching career, your teaching stuff you've done a couple of times. And I forgot how much of a young person's game creating a course from scratch is. Writing lectures from scratch the night before, pulling it together, coming up with examples, trying to come up with interactive activities. And so I'd get to the end of a week and I go, I got it all done. And I'd pat myself on the back and be happy for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then, oh, I have to do it all again next week. I got to start it all over, come up with new stuff. But as tiring as it was, it's this wonderful roller coaster of creativity and implementation and a little bit of anxiety, and then you do it, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And in this case, it pretty much all came together. So about halfway through the semester, because I'm not doing a course that exists anywhere else, as far as I know, I'm sure there's some out there, but unlike human anatomy that's everywhere or genetics that's everywhere, I'm doing something that is more creative than any other course that I've put together. And at the end of the day, when I see what I put together, I go, this would not exist if I hadn't put it together. And I'm only doing it at this point for 10 young, amazing people that I'm devoting the entirety of this semester to crafting this journey, the celebration of play. And I've never worked that hard on a gift for anyone in my life, because that's ultimately what it was. It was a gift to these students. And what was so wonderful about it is how receptive and full of gratitude they seemed to be. And the fact that it may have only been for 10 students. And again, I do plan on repeating this course next fall. That's okay. I'm glad I did it, and it felt wonderful to create this thing for them. So yeah, I am having a good time.
Yeah, it's I can tell it's fun.
Mhm.
And if you can keep things going in your life that's fun, then I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are.
Yep. 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 So in a sense, the class itself embodied for me a form of play.
Mm-hmm. It did.
No.
I could tell. So I didn't have anything else really.
All right. Any other questions from the folks out there?
Nice to see you, Ashley.
Yes, you too. It's nice to put a face to a name.
Yeah.
I just want to ask Nancy, what year did you graduate from Southwestern?
That's a good question. It was actually January of 67, I think it was, or 68. I was in the 67 class, but I went an extra semester to get a double major.
We must have crossed paths one semester because I started in fall of 67.
Okay. Yeah. It's I had the big four. I had Dr. Laws, Orland Calling, Mr. Huber, and Dr. Dabowski. And
Some names from the past.
what'd you say?
I said some names from the past. I know all those names.
And Orland Calling took us to Kansas City
Mm-hmm.
and made
Orland
us work.
was definitely, from my understanding, a good celebrator of interdisciplinary ideas.
He was a Quaker, I believe, if I remember. And he
Yeah.
took us to inner city, Kansas City, and had us painting and working our butts off. And it was actually, I still remember that. I mean, it was an eye opener. And also I had a chance to go to Selma, for but I didn't do it because I didn't have the money.
Mhm.
And
So Ashley, to put that in context, so Orland takes them to Kansas City, visit the inner city, do some painting. His background, he was a chemist.
oh, well, duh. I took several courses from him. Yes, I know. Physical chemistry, I took that. That broke me. But yeah, it's I had delightful professors, very learned and always, always kind and helpful. But those were instances where before we had an honors program or go someplace, where then those professors had, and I don't know about the January term. I didn't know about that. So anyway, that's all I had to say. But so where you graduated when now?
71.
Oh, okay.
And I started in 67. Now, the following year would have been, and if Carl's still there, he would know for sure if he was there. I think he was.
I remember Carl.
Yeah, I mean, Carl taught their New Testament for sure, as I recall, in my first years or so. But
yeah,
I think the Jan term started the next year after you left.
Yeah.
I think it started in the fall of 68.
Yeah, that's okay. And I was getting ready to graduate. And so anyway, yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, Southwestern was a wonderful place. And I just think that this program, I mean, I'm very excited for you, Pat, and for all the students that can participate. I'm just sad that there's a age gap over here that I can't sign up.
Well, I think
Maybe we'll have to do an alumni version.
Well,
a program.
I want to. That's just what I was thinking. We need an alumni version. There is, because I know what I'm experiencing personally, and many of my peers. I'm not alone. I feel alone, but I'm not alone in terms of figuring out what to do next. At this age, how to be relevant to what's going on in the current society, which is, I find, so chaotic and disturbing personally.
yeah, that's
Carl, good,
yeah.
go ahead, Nancy. So, Carl, you're really not that old, really.
No, you're not, Carl.
Because in today's situation, with many people living to 100, many more than used to, being in your early to mid 80s is not that old.
Are you saying it's no accomplishment? Okay, I've had people say that to me. Well, Carl, it's pretty ordinary. I am glad to be alive.
Yeah, we could do it. I mean, as I mentioned, my mom helped me plan the trip, and she visited a lot of these destinations with me, and she's about 82.
Yeah. And I went to Chicago, excuse me. I went to Chicago several times on Emico business, and took advantage of all that Chicago offered. Boy, of course, Emico was paying.
Yeah, that helps.
But Chicago was fun. So I'm jealous of you all. I'm sure you all are going to have a great time. And
I've learned Chicago a couple different ways. Obviously, I grew up in the suburbs, so I know Chicago the way a kid knows Chicago, a city of museums and concerts and plays and stuff. And then went to California for grad school, and my wife studied at Northwestern downtown and got her physical therapy degree there. So I then got to know Chicago in my 20s, which is a different Chicago than the Chicago that a 12-year-old experiences. And now I'm getting to know it as a professor, putting a class together about it. And that's a whole different way of looking at that city.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, all those perspectives are wonderful. It's an amazing place. It's got so much going on that it'll be fun to share that with another batch of students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, for stopping by. All right, looks like we're coming up on the hour. I'm not sure how much time we had budgeted for this, but I think an hour and a half was sort of the outer limits.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming today. And thank you, Pat, for presenting and telling us all about everything on the honors program this year. Our next coffee chat is going to be January 12th at 10:30, and President Liz will be speaking, and she'll be telling us what's going on for next semester, so the spring semester update. So if you guys would like to join that, watch your emails. I'll be sending stuff out probably the beginning of January, so just keep your eyes peeled.
I would very much like to hear her.
Oh yeah, she's wonderful. Do we have any last comments or questions or anything for Pat?
No, but thanks. I think it's a real feather in the cap of Southwestern to have this honors program.
It is. I really do. I agree.
I mean, it's not only does it benefit Southwestern's reputation, but obviously it's going to have a positive effect on the students participating in it.
Yeah, that's they'll have memories. They'll have great memories, I'm sure.
Yeah. And it's been personally amazingly gratifying for me to be given this opportunity.
Yeah. No kidding.
Well, thanks for making this possible, Ashley. And nice meeting
thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.